Look at you, Tony muttered to his reflection, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. You passed the bar. You got the paper. Now you got the world and everything in it. Then a thought came to him. It took you 6 times to pass the bar. Yeah, but I got street smarts too, and I look good. Suddenly, his mom shouted from the kitchen. You want some lemonade, Tony? No, Mom. I'm in my office working. Please knock before shouting. I might be with a client. You just got your law license yesterday and you're in the garage? Please, Mom. Okay, Mr. Big Shot. I'll make an appointment for when lunch is ready. Tony propped his phone against a stack of law books and hit record. As he recorded his message, Tony Moreno looked every bit the part of Tony Montana from Scarface. You'd swear they were identical twins, the same piercing eyes, the same gravelly voice. He even dressed like him for the occasion. Tony got into character. Listen to me, people on the internet, he began, waving a lit cigar. You got a problem? You go to one of those big firms, they look at you from your head to your shoes. But Tony looks at you like a brother. I don't care if you're a dishwasher or Elon Musk. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, well, you better have a good lawyer. He leaned in. The law and the world today? A tough lady, Mang. She wants to see if you got the cojones. And if the DA wants to play games, if they want to lock you up or run for office on your pain, I tell them, let me introduce you to my little friend. He slammed a massive 2,000-page Florida statutes book onto the plywood desk. The video went nuclear. Within 48 hours, the Scarface twin had 20 million likes. Comments were a war zone. Is he real? He sounds just like him. I don't care if he's a twin. I want him to sue my landlord. I want him to have my baby. The next morning, the smell of his mom's cafecito drifted into the garage, followed by a man who looked like he'd been dragged through a gravel pit. Mark Sanchez sat on a plastic lawn chair, his eyes hard and hollow. I saw the video, Sanchez said, his voice like dry leaves. Tony leaned back, the springs of his chair screaming. You like the video? Everybody likes the video. It's the eyes, Mang. They never lie. So what you want? You want a selfie? Or you got a problem? I'm ex-DEA, Sanchez said. I just did 10 years in the joint. Tony's eyes narrowed. 10 years? That's a long time to be looking at a wall, Mang. What did they get you for? Doing your job too good? Or being a bad boy? What did you do? They said I robbed a cartel stash house. Said I took 2 keys of coke and $500,000 in cash from the evidence locker. Sanchez spat. It was a setup. My supervisor, Miller, he was the one moving the product. I found out, so they buried me. They put the money in my trunk and the drugs in my locker. I couldn't prove a thing. Tony took a slow drag of his cigar, the smoke curling around his slicked back hair. So, you were a patsy, and now a cockroach comes along, punk-ass Miller. He thinks he can just take a man's life and throw it in the trash? I don't like that. I don't like people who think they're better than everyone else. I have a ledger, Tony, Sanchez said, voice low. It's hidden in a crawl space. Dates, payoffs, videos. Miller and his boys doing lines and drinking at a party. The same party where I got convicted. They even have a toast, to me. To Mark Sanchez, enjoy your stay at Club Fed. You can see them laughing it up. He paused, looking Tony in the eye. I believe it's payback time. I just need a lawyer who isn't afraid of the feds. Tony stood up, smoothing his vest. Afraid? You know what I am, Mark? I'm a political refugee. I come from nothing. Suddenly, his mom shouted from the kitchen, You were born in Miami, not Havana? Mom, I'm with a client, Tony muttered, rolling his eyes. Mark shook his head, smiling faintly. Deep down, he knew Tony Moreno was the man he needed. The courtroom in downtown Miami buzzed with tension. The lead defense attorney, Mr. Kane, a man who looked like he'd never missed a haircut, shot Tony a glare full of contempt. Your Honor, Kane sneered, Mr. Moreno is turning this courtroom into a circus with this frivolous lawsuit. He isn't even citing the proper motions. Overruled, the judge said firmly. Mr. Kane, you may proceed. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, What you are about to see is smoke and mirrors. Mr. Moreno is asking you to base your judgment on assumptions, and hearsay my client, Mr. Miller, upheld the law. He followed procedure. The accusations you'll hear rely on theatrics, not facts. I ask you to focus on the evidence, not the performance designed to sway your emotions. Justice requires careful consideration, not spectacle. Then Tony's turn. Ladies and gentlemen, today, we put the badge on trial. The federal government, the DEA, they think they are untouchable. My client, Mark Sanchez, was betrayed by the very people sworn to protect him. They laughed at his life while hiding behind procedure and badges. This isn't about politics or fancy words. It's about justice. Real justice. Justice for the innocent, not for those who think a badge makes them untouchable. You have the power to see the truth and to act on it. The jury leaned in, sensing the fire in Tony's voice. Miller squirmed on the stand, sweat pouring down his face. You, Tony growled, you thought Mark Sanchez was garbage, something you could sweep under the rug like trash because he was going to turn all of you in. Look at me. Answer me. Objection, Your Honor, Kane snapped. Badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said sharply. Mr. Moreno, bring it down a notch. Tony nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Miller. Yes, Your Honor, Miller swallowed. I followed procedure. Procedure? You call stealing from drug dealers procedure? Tony slammed his hand on the railing. You think you're above the law. You think you are the law. You're nothing. You're a cockroach. Objection, Your Honor, Kane barked. Sustain. Less theatrics, Mr. Moreno. Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, Tony said, holding up a USB drive. I'd like to introduce this video as evidence. I received it just before court this morning. Objection, Your Honor, Kane snapped. Noted, the judge said. We cannot allow surprise evidence without giving the defense time. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. The defense will review the video. Proceedings resume then. Tony produced the ledger, handing it to Kane with a confident smirk. The next morning, the courtroom fell silent. Your Honor, Kane said, standing, we cannot allow this evidence. We don't know who created it. It appears fabricated or staged. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Moreno, can you authenticate this ledger? Tony grinned. Yes, Your Honor. The ledger contains original signatures, dates, and documented payoffs that match verified records. It even includes Supervisor Miller and his DEA conspirators. Honestly, these guys are so ugly, I don't know how anyone could fabricate something that looks this bad. A ripple of laughter broke out across the jury box before the judge raised a hand for order. Objection, Your Honor! Mr. Moreno is dancing around like a comedy show! The judge tapped the gavel lightly. Preliminary authentication is established. Ledger admitted, subject to verification. Tony inserted the USB. Grainy footage played. Miller and DEA agents laughing, counting cash, handling evidence. Notice the date stamps. Notice the faces. Notice the toast. To Mark Sanchez, enjoy your stay at Club Fed. Don't bend over for the soap. They're all laughing. Miller shifted, pale. Kane fumbled papers. You thought you could bury the truth, Tony said, locking eyes with Miller. But now, everyone sees. Everyone knows. Miller stood abruptly. It's fake! You made this up! The judge leaned forward. Mr. Miller, remain seated. Wait until Mr. Moreno finishes. Objection, Your Honor, Kane barked. Mr. Kane, this sounds like an attempt to provoke a mistrial. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. Tony's voice stayed calm, but every word cut like a knife. Fake, huh? You saw the date stamps, the faces, the toast. You laughed while my client went to prison. Are you saying all of them are lying too? The jury exchanged wide-eyed glances, scribbling notes furiously. Some shook their heads, whispering to one another. Miller fidgeted under the scrutiny. The next day, the courtroom was packed. Mr. Kane, the judge said evenly, are you ready for closing arguments? Yes, Your Honor, Kane replied. Kane rose slowly, adjusting his tie, smoothing his jacket, and turning to face the jury, calm, composed, and confident as he began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this evidence was presented at the last minute with no proper verification. You are being asked to decide this case based on assumptions and theatrics, not facts. There is no clear chain of custody, no independent forensic authentication. What you saw was dramatic, but drama is not proof. My client followed procedure. He did his job under difficult circumstances. And in this courtroom, suspicion is not evidence, and performance is not truth. I ask you to focus on what has been proven, not on what has been performed. When you do, the only fair verdict is in favor of the defense. Mr. Moreno, the judge said, are you ready for closing arguments? Yes, Your Honor. Tony stood slowly. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and lifted his chin, settling into that unmistakable Tony Montana look. The room went quiet. The jury leaned forward. Tony took one step toward them. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the ledger, the video, the toast. My client, Mark Sanchez, was betrayed by those sworn to protect him. This isn't about politics or words, it's about justice. Real justice. The truth is here. It's in your hands. Do what's right. The jury leaned forward, eyes fixed on Tony, feeling the weight of the choice before them. The jury was given its final instructions and sent to deliberate. The next morning, the courtroom was thick with tension. Every eye locked on the jury box. Tony Moreno leaned back slightly, vest sharp, tie loosened, calm on the surface, fire underneath. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The foreperson stood. Yes, Your Honor. The bailiff took the folded slip of paper and carried it to the bench. The judge read it silently, his expression unreadable. He looked up. Please read the verdict. The foreperson took a breath, steadying himself before speaking. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Mark Sanchez, he said clearly, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. We award $50 million in compensatory damages for the harm suffered. A murmur rippled through the room. The foreperson continued, eyes briefly flicking toward Miller before returning to the judge. In addition, we find that the conduct of Supervisor Miller and the involved DEA agents was willful and malicious. Therefore, we award punitive damages. He paused. Total damages awarded, $50 million. The courtroom froze for a heartbeat. Then reality hit. A hush fell over the room. Tony Moreno's grin spread slowly, deliberately, his gravelly voice muttering under his breath. 50 million, Mang. Justice done. The judge raised his hand, silencing the courtroom as the murmurs swelled. Before this court is adjourned, he said firmly, let the record reflect that the jury's findings reveal evidence of potential criminal misconduct. He turned his cold gaze toward Miller and the agents. This court is formally referring Supervisor Miller, the named agents, and the involved DEA office to the Department of Justice for immediate review and possible criminal prosecution. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the gallery. Badges do not grant immunity, the judge continued. If crimes were committed under the color of authority, they will be answered for, fully and publicly. He brought the gavel down. This court is adjourned. Tony slammed a hand lightly on the railing, eyes locked on Mark Sanchez. You see that, Poppy? That's the truth running the show. Miller went pale. Kane's jaw tightened. Tony leaned back, Scarface swagger unmistakable. He turned toward the jury, nodding once. Tony walked toward the exit, every step calm, confident. Outside, Miami waited, loud, alive. Tony Moreno didn't look back. 50 million, Mang, he muttered with a smirk. And that's just the beginning, reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Mark Sanchez was surrounded by family, shaking hands, overwhelmed. Tony Moreno stepped out beside him, jacket over his shoulder, the swagger unmistakable. Then a familiar voice cut through the noise. Tony! He froze. His mom stood by the courthouse steps, arms crossed, purse tucked under her arm like she owned the place. Congratulations, Tony, she said proudly. I invited your tias and tios. We're having a carne asada. Mom, Tony said, blinking, I just won the case 5 minutes ago. She smiled, nodding calmly. Tony, Mama always knows. She looked him up and down, then tilted her head. So, Mr. Big Shot, now that you won $50 million, you moving out of the garage? Tony smirked, adjusting his tie. Not yet, Mom Dot, and it's 16 million good. Dinner's at 6. Don't be late. She turned and walked off, disappearing into the crowd. A few pretty women stepped closer, smiles wide. Hola, papi, one of them purred. Congratulations, Tony grinned, straightening his jacket. Hola, mommy, you need a lawyer? No, I need a real man, papi, the girls giggled, surrounding him. Tony soaked it in, cigar between his fingers, Miami sun on his face. For a moment, he was on top of the world. And tomorrow morning, he'd still be practicing law in his mama's garage. And so begin the adventures of Tony Moreno, the Scarface lawyer.